Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Wright.
I'm Brian Allen. After the South Dakota Board of Education Standards adopted new social studies standards Monday, districts and educators across the state will now have to grapple with how to implement them.
That work begins now for the educators who decide they do want to stay on board. State House reporter Austin Goss telling us more from the Peer Newsroom.
South Dakota education advocacy groups are warning that the newly adopted social studies standards may push more teachers out of the workforce. That's after the adoption of controversial standards Monday, where opponent testimony outweighed proponents roughly 10-1. But Secretary of Education Joe Graves says he doesn't feel it was that clear-cut against the standards.
I have heard from a lot of educators who are definitely in favor of the standards. Because of the controversy and because educators don't tend to like to be involved in controversies for the most part, they've just stayed silent.
The South Dakota Education Association was one of the organizations that testified against the new standards. They fear it could lead to less teachers and a field already stretched thin.
They do feel disrespected. They don't feel heard. And so I think we'll see some educators who are close to retirement, or we're looking at other fields to go into. I think we're going to see them move into that pretty quickly here.
Graves says that educators were a valuable part of the input process, whether for or against the standards. And while adopting the new standards will certainly prove a challenge, he wants to make it as streamlined as possible, starting this summer with instructional summits.
We're going to have lots of speakers, lots of educators talking about how to teach these. We're going to have reenactors, and we're going to have a lot of fun events.
Every district across the state is looking for some type of an educator in some form or another, and this is not going to help that. The disrespect that they feel is real.
In Fort Pierre, Austin Goss, Dakota News Now.